right, welcome. If you're gearing up for exams or just want a really solid understanding of early orthodontic treatment, you've definitely come to the right place. This is your go-to guide for preventative and interceptive orthodontics. Okay, let's just dive right in. So, we have to start with the most basic question of all, the one that this entire field is built on. Why? Why do we even think about treating orthodontic issues in young patients while they're still growing? What's the big advantage of getting in there early? The thinking behind it is incredibly powerful. Early intervention just lets us get ahead of problems before they become, well, big problems. We can put a stop to destructive habits like thumb sucking before they cause any lasting damage. We can correct functional shifts, where the jaw slides into a bite that's comfortable but totally wrong, and stop it from messing up growth patterns. And honestly, the biggest thing is that working with growing bones is just easier. It's a lot less demanding and can be way more efficient than waiting for the teenage years when you might need more complicated, fixed appliances to get the job done. But of course, before we can jump in and fix anything, we have to know exactly what we're dealing with. A really precise diagnosis is the absolute bedrock of any good treatment plan. So let's break down how that whole systematic process actually works. I want you to think of your diagnosis like a three-legged stool. It's got to have all three of these pillars to be stable, right? You need a really thorough patient history, a detailed hands-on clinical exam, and the right set of diagnostic records. Each one of these gives you a totally unique piece of the puzzle. This slide does a great job of laying out the workflow, and the order here is really important. See, we always start with the patient's story, their history, what brought them in, because that context shapes everything else. It tells us what to look for during the clinical exam, and that, in turn, tells us which specific records we'll need to really nail down our findings. Now, when we drill down into the clinical exam itself, you can see it's not just about looking at teeth. Not at all. It's a full-on comprehensive evaluation. We look at the face from the outside, that's the extraoral exam. Then we assess everything inside the mouth, the hard and soft tissues. That's the intraoral exam. And then we watch how it all works together when they do things like swallow and speak, and that's the functional exam. And this slide? It's brilliant because it shows that not all records are created equal. You've got your essential records. These are the non-negotiables, things like study models and standard x-rays that you'll pretty much need for every single case. But then you have your supplemental records. Think of these as your specialist tools, maybe a CBCT scan to find an impacted tooth. You only bring these out for those specific, more complex situations where you need a much deeper look. Okay, so you've got your diagnosis. Now what? It's time to build a strategy. And when we're talking about early treatment, that strategy is almost always going to fall into one of two major camps. So if you look at the big picture, all orthodontic procedures can be sorted into three main buckets, and it really just depends on their goal and their timing. For our chat today on early treatment, we're going to ignore that third, biggest bucket, comprehensive orthodontics, and really focus in on the first two. And those three categories are preventative, interceptive, and comprehensive. Now, comprehensive is what you usually think of, full-on braces later in life. But for this explainer, we're really zeroing in on those first two, because they are the heart and soul of early intervention. All right, so here's the key point about preventative orthodontics. It's all about protection. It's when you look at a kid's development, see that it's on a normal, healthy path, and you take action to make sure nothing knocks it off course. The classic example? Putting in a space maintainer after a baby tooth is lost too soon. You're just preserving what's normal to prevent a future problem. Interceptive orthodontics, though, is totally different. It's a response. It means a problem has already started to show up. A malocclusion isn't just a possibility anymore, it's actually happening. Let's say you can see a crossbite starting to develop. Your job is to step in, to intercept it, maybe with something like an expander, and guide things back to a normal path. This slide is pure exam gold. You have to know this. It perfectly contrasts the two mindsets. Preventive is proactive. Its whole goal is to keep things normal before a problem ever starts. Interceptive is reactive. Its goal is to fix an issue after it's already popped up. One preserves, the other corrects. That's the distinction you have to burn into your brain. Okay, so let's get practical. What does this stuff actually look like when you're in the clinic? What are the actual tools in our toolbox for preventative and interceptive care? And here is that clinical toolbox. It looks like a long list, I know, but for exams, it's super helpful to just group them mentally into a few key areas. First, you have space management.
That's all about making sure there's enough room, right? So caring for baby teeth, managing cavities to prevent early loss, keeping that shedding timetable on track. Then there's eruption guidance. Here, you're basically playing traffic cop for the permanent teeth, getting rid of extra teeth, fixing ones that are erupting in the wrong spot, or dealing with ankylosed baby teeth that just won't leave. And finally, you have habit and function management. This is where we tackle those pesky oral habits or abnormal frenal attachments that can get in the way of normal development. And tying it all together, of course, is patient and parent education.
All right, let's make sure this information really sticks. To wrap things up, we're going to do a quick fire review of the core concepts you absolutely have to walk away with. Number 1, preventive orthodontics. Its job is to protect what's already normal. Think of it like you're building a fence to keep everything on the right path. Number 2, interceptive orthodontics. This is your response team. You only call them in after a problem has already started to happen. And finally, never forget that none of this happens in a vacuum. Every single treatment decision you make has to be built on that solid 3-part diagnostic foundation. And I'll leave you with this final thought, a question to really apply what you've learned today. We all know habits like thumb sucking are super common in kids, but based on everything we've talked about, at what exact point does that habit cross the line from being a normal part of childhood to becoming a real clinical problem that demands your interception? Thinking that through, that's where a good clinician becomes a great one.